guys, how's it going? It's Al. Week 7 is here, and I have my running back ones and running back twos, my running back rankings for the week to help you sort through all of your start-sit questions. If you have 3 or 4 running backs, especially going into this week where there are some massive bye weeks, the Bills, the Vikings, the Eagles, the Rams, definitely some characters on there that have frequented our top 24 week in and week out, you are going to need to have some fill-ins for these spots. So that's what these rankings are for. If you have 3 running backs and you want to know which 2 you should start the 2 that I have higher on the list in your friends and family league, because I want you to beat your idiot friends, right? I really do. So let's see what we can do to help you do that, and let's go.
He's a legend.
The Week 7 Smiz Gang Listener League is posted. It's 5,000 entries thick, and it is a $10 entry fee with 3 max only. There's absolutely no rake. It's the best tournament that exists on DraftKings, but you cannot find it if you go to the DraftKings lobby. You have to go through smizzle.tv/links. You'll find the link to the Listener League right in there, as well as the links to literally everything else I do. Every Thursday I come out with Best Buys, that link is in there. All of my other channels, those links are in there. Instagram, Twitch channel, if you wanted to catch the live streams, all of that is available in the link tree at smizzle.tv/links. Make sure that you get into it, because I will shout out the top 10 finishers on the recap video every Monday. Leading everything off amidst all the trade rumors is going to be Christian McCaffrey in the 1 spot. Now, look, I'm not of the mindset that the Panthers are going to be able to get what they're asking for Christian McCaffrey. The rumor is that they want to get at least 1 first rounder for McCaffrey this year to help put them in the best spot that they possibly can to be able to deal assets. I think they have like 4 draft picks in next year's draft, and they're trying to acquire enough assets to move up into the top 5 to get one of these super stud quarterbacks so that they can actually, go about building this franchise the right way instead of the wrong way that they've been going for the last 3-4 years of going after also ran veterans at quarterback. But that's a whole other video. Christian McCaffrey was not sat out. That was a worry for some people last week, that because they are looking to trade him, that they were not going to give him a full volume of snaps and touches. They did exactly that. They gave him a full volume of snaps and touches. He got 13 carries, caught 7 balls on 8 targets, scored 22.8 DraftKings points, 20.7 fantasy points per game this season so far. I mean, there is no running back in the league that will consistently get you there on volume alone, but still carry touchdown upside with him as Christian McCaffrey. 22.8 or more points each of the last 3 weeks, and no week under 15 points. He is the number 1 for a reason. He should have been the number 1 pick overall for that same exact reason. And everybody who was hanging their hat on, well, he got injured too much last year and he burned me, so I'm not picking him. Guess what? He's the number 1 running back again, because he can get you those very reliable points on volume alone and still have touchdown upside on top of it. Austin Ekeler is cut from that same exact cloth, but is not playing as many snaps or getting as many touches on a week in, week out basis as Christian McCaffrey. What he is doing is still playing 60, maybe 65% of snaps. At least he did on Monday night. Usually they've kept him under 60% of the snaps so far this year. But he is on pace to break Christian McCaffrey's single season pass catching record for a running back that he set back in like 2019 or whatever. So this is a very productive back. Do not expect more than 15 carries from him. He typically sits between 11 and 15, which is what we want to see, like from Alvin Kamara, from Christian McCaffrey, from Austin Ekeler. That is the ideal PPR usage for any back. Now, he has scored 4 touchdowns on the ground in the last 3 weeks, as well as 2 through the air. So like, there are people that are calling for some regression in terms of Austin Ekeler, because he's not playing all of the snaps, but every time he's on the field, he gets a tremendous amount of value. He is a first rounder that is returning first round value. His ADP was like 6th at the beginning of the year. Obviously, you're starting him if you have him. He is in a fantastic spot in the highest scoring game of the week in a home matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, who have just been thrashed by opposing running backs all season long. Behind Ekeler, I have Saquon Barkley, another player who has outperformed his ADP. We were very high on him on this channel all offseason long. He was going in like the 3rd round early in draft season. He ended up around the 11 or 12 pick on ADP. So hopefully you loaded up earlier in the summer. That's the edge if you draft early. You're going to get guys who the public has not come around on, who do project as major values. A lot of people were staying off Saquon Barkley because he had been injured in the past. Yes, certain injuries can reoccur and can be predictive of some future injury, but when they're freak injuries like Saquon Barkley had last year, stepping on somebody's ankle after a play was dead, that's a freak accident and not a recurring injury. Saquon's volume has been tremendous. And yes, I know he slid and took a touchdown away from people, but it was the right football play. 25 opportunities last week against Baltimore, 19 the week before against Green Bay, 33 opportunities, that's carries plus targets against Chicago. Massive volume every week. The number one offensive play for the New York Giants, whose offense has been way more efficient than one would expect due to all of the injuries they've suffered in the wide receiver room. I would expect Saquon's touchdown expectancy to increase as those wide receivers get more and more healthy, though he has scored 3 touchdowns the last 4 weeks. Alvin Kamara is back and healthy, but the other offensive pieces around him are not, and that's leading to a mountain of opportunity for him the last 2 weeks. 23 carries and 6 targets against Seattle. 19 carries, 9 targets against Cincinnati. This is way more usage on the ground than we're used to from Alvin Kamara. I've mentioned 100 times and at least twice in this video that 11 to 15 carries is optimal for us for a PPR back with like 5 to 10 targets. He's getting that, but also more opportunity on the ground. He's been extremely efficient with over 4 yards per carry in every game this year, 4.5, 5.2 in the last 2 games. They have the Thursday night matchup against Arizona, a normal total in this one, 45.5. If you have Kamara, you're finally happy that he's ready to go. And without Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry still staying like kind of so-so iffy, he's going to maintain that volume in the pass game because they just don't have much else outside of Chris Olave to throw the ball to. Now, the worry with Kamara is that he gets vultured when they get around the goal line by the ever-annoying Taysom Hill. Not annoying as a person, just annoying in fantasy. Derrick Henry, the big dog, comes in right behind him. 3 straight fantastic games, 25.3, 26.7, and 30.2 PPR points for Derrick Henry the last 3 games. And over those 3 games, and now he's coming off of a bye week, he got 13 targets. That's what we want. 4 targets a game from Derrick Henry is beautiful. That's exactly the usage that you want if you have Derrick Henry on your team. We've been begging for that for years, because once you get this guy the ball in space with blockers in front of him, as you can on any screenplay, he's rattled off at least a 22-yard gain on a reception each of the last 3 games. Hopefully that volume in the passing game sustains, because everything else, as you know, has been historically good for Derrick Henry while he's been on the Titans. This week, favored at home against Indianapolis, just a smash play. Leonard Fournette has racked up a ton of usage in the passing game. They have tried to limit his usage, like in terms of snaps. There were like 2-3 weeks in a row where he played 95 to 100% of the running back snaps. Nobody is going to be able to handle that sort of workload, especially not a big back like Leonard Fournette. So they've cycled in the rookie Rachaad White, and he's done fine, but like really, this is Lenny's show with 7 targets, 11 targets, 6 targets the last 3 games, 6 targets in week 3 also. Just one of the top pass catching backs in the league. Now, if you told me 5 years ago that Leonard Fournette was the top pass catching back in the league, the narrative was he couldn't catch the ball. That's just not been the case. He obviously has Tom Brady's trust. This team has to turn things around, and they are going to use Leonard Fournette as a battering ram around the goal line and between the 20s as a major part of this offense in the passing game. The 100-yard bonus days may not be there as much as they were in the past. The 100-yard plus games on the ground may not be there in the past, but 100 yards from scrimmage certainly in play, and a passing touchdown in each of the last 3 games. Joe Mixon comes in right behind Leonard Fournette as my number 7 on the week. Mixon has seen tremendous volume, and again, somebody who has seen increased volume in the passing game. Are you noticing something here? It's all players who have either a ton of volume in the passing game or running backs who have seen increased volume in the passing game, because the target is worth 2.3 expected fantasy points more than each carry. Sorry, multiple. 2.3x more expected fantasy points than a carry, because of full PPR being what it is and the yardage attached to it. Catches are just more valuable. A 4-yard catch is worth more points than a 4-yard run. It's just the way that it works. So you want guys that get targets. We've talked about targeting targets in the past. There has not been one game this year where Joe Mixon has had less than 3 targets, in every game except that one he had 4 or more. It's not like he just sits on 3. Last week, 5 targets. Week 3 against the Jets, 7 targets. Week 1 against Pittsburgh, 9 targets. Now he squares off against Atlanta, another home favored running back with a really high team total of 27.5. Joe Mixon has certainly paid off for you on his draft cost. Start him with confidence. Nick Chubb has just been doing spectacular, but you know that Nick Chubb is always going to be that guy that if he does not catch passes, there is always the possibility that he puts up a sub 10-point week. And that's why he falls behind all these other guys. He may be a more talented runner than many of the guys that we have ranked in front of him, right? One of the best big play running backs in the league. Has him and Jonathan Taylor have, like, over the last 3 seasons, had the most long touchdown runs of 40 yards or more in the league. It's like those two guys are better than everybody else. But 2 targets last week, 1 target in week 5, 1 target in week 3. We need to get him like Derrick Henry usage. And I say that kind of sarcastically because Derrick Henry now getting the targets. And if Nick Chubb got 4 or 5 targets a week, he'd be an unstoppable force in fantasy. Unfortunately, you're going to have games where he gets like 25 to 35 fantasy points, and games like last week against New England where he gets kind of scripted out because they're playing from behind and they don't utilize him in the passing game. So there's danger. But if you have Nick Chubb, you're starting him. Like, he's clearly an RB1. We've seen the massive upside, averaging 21.8 fantasy points per game, but they are playing from behind in this one and on the road. That does not bode well. So you kind of got to bite your lip and just start Nick Chubb in this week and hope that he gets you like 15 fantasy points, because below that average is more than likely in play because of how little they use him in the passing game. At number 9, I think for the second straight week, I have Ramondre Stevenson. Stevenson did a fantastic job last week. Scored 25.1 fantasy points in PPR, but scored 2 touchdowns, one of them from 31 yards out. If you take those 2 touchdowns away, that subtracts 12 points. That's 13.1 points on volume. We also have the fact that Damien Harris was warming up before this game, testing out that hamstring last week in week 6 against Cleveland. They square off against Chicago this week. A tougher defense against the run than Cleveland, but like literally everybody's a tougher defense against the run than Cleveland. The worry here is that if Damien Harris comes back, Ramondre is going to drop away from being like an 85+% of the snaps and touches guy at running back to more of like a 50% of the snaps and touches. So he's 9 with caution at the time that I'm recording this on Tuesday afternoon. At 10, one of the better matchups this week is Josh Jacobs. The Raiders running back has been doing extremely well, squares off against Houston, another team that we are going to stream running backs against every week. If a running back is playing against Houston or Cleveland, expect them to be higher on the rankings than they normally would be. 5 targets in week 5, coming off a bye week in week 6, 6 targets in week 4, 5 targets in week 3. That is what I want to see Josh Jacobs' usage be, and I want it to see it be that consistently. The problem is weeks 1 and 2, he saw 1 target in each of those games. So if they can continue this new Josh Jacobs paradigm, if they can just continue giving him this amount of target usage, this amount of involvement in target percentage in terms of the market share of all the targets coming from Carr, Josh Jacobs is just going to be a monster moving forward. Always going to get the inside the 5 carries. We need to see that consistent usage in the passing game. The Jets have moved to a very they went from being a very pass-heavy offense with Joe Flacco at the helm to going to a very run-heavy approach, much less passes over expectations. Like, they are now a running team. And Breece Hall has been the main beneficiary of that, with 20 carries in week 6, 18 carries in week 5, and 17 carries in week 4. The rookie has responded tremendously with 23.1, 30.7, 15.8 fantasy points per game as they have shifted to this much more conservative offense since Wilson came back, trying to ease the rookie back into play. Maybe they're protecting him. Maybe they don't think that he can make the decisions the right way. Maybe he's too turnover prone and they're trying to slow things down to be a running and defense team. Would make sense with who their coach is. But Breece Hall, as I said, has been the main beneficiary. What I don't like is that he's gotten 2 targets each of the last 2 games. However, they won those games 27-10 and 40-17. So it's very possible that the Jets' approach to throwing the ball to their running backs, I know that I've said before, and it's true, that Wilson has not really thrown the ball to running backs. It's when they went to Mike White and Joe Flacco that they dumped the ball off more in the flat to any of the running backs that are out there, whether it's Carter, whether it's Breece Hall, or whomever. But also, when you're playing from ahead, you have no need to throw the ball a ton to your running backs. You're just not dropping back as much. So less targets to go around in total, but maybe if they're playing from behind in this game, as they are slight underdogs to Denver and on the road, we might see an uptick to like 4 or 5 targets for Breece Hall, but he has been very efficient and very explosive in a small sample size of work thus far. Big things coming for him. At number 12, rounding off my RB1s is DeAndre Swift. Now, I may be out of pocket here, but DeAndre Swift coming back from injury and coming off of a bye week should be extremely well rested. My danger here is that Jamal Williams, whether Swift was active or not, was handling basically all of the inside the 5 carries. So Swift is going to have to score from distance, something that he is that's definitely a tool that he has in his locker, right? 50-yard run in week 1, 50-yard run in week 2, 25-yard catch in week 1, 22-yard catch in week 2. I believe that the the shoulder injury should be fine by the time he gets here. If he's not fine, then obviously don't play him. I would probably replace him in this spot with Jamal Williams because of the situation with them going up against Dallas and having to establish the hell out of it. But right now, I'm expecting DeAndre Swift to be a full go in this spot, which has him here at 12 for me. Take a second and be a part of our fundraiser that's going on this season. No Kid Hungry, providing school breakfasts and lunches, as well as at-home care to food insecure kids across the country. We have raised just over $27,000 thus far. That ticker down below me will show that all throughout the football season. This fundraiser will go until December 31st. Every donation is 100% tax deductible and goes through smizzle.tv/charity, where Tiltify will handle everything for you. The donation, they'll send you an email for all of the tax paperwork that you're going to need so that you can utilize that as you will. Every single dollar helps. And once we get to $30,000, that will trigger the next match from me. Every single $10,000 that the community raises, I will match $10,000 up to $50,000, giving us hopefully that grand total of $100,000 raised between the Smizz Gang community, that's you, and myself. So let's make a difference today. Every dollar helps. Be a part of something bigger than yourself. Moving on to my running back twos on the week, I'm going to lead off with Damien Pierce. The rookie has been outstanding so far. Definitely passes the eyeball test and certainly getting enough volume. Before this season, my Damien Pierce take was, what is the ceiling for running back on a really bad team? And that ceiling was James Robinson's rookie year when he was on Jacksonville. Volume over everything. The concern early in the year was that they weren't throwing the ball to Damien Pierce. Week 1, they were throwing it all over the place. They didn't even play him all that much in week 1. And then they finally worked him back into the thing in week 2. And since then, he has just been an absolute wrecking ball. 20.3 fantasy points in week 5, 28.9 in week 4, 18.1 in week 3 for a team that went 1-2. This is a touchdown in all of those 3 games. Pierce just pops. And this isn't a terrible matchup against Las Vegas, albeit underdogs and on the road. He's proven that they have to give him the ball. He's the most explosive weapon that they have on offense. Easily sits here at 13. Hopefully you got him early before he moved up in ADP in the offseason to like 40 to 60. By the last week before the season started, he was being drafted between like 150 and 200. Then he had jumped up to like between 100 and 130 until the massive skyrocket after they played a couple of preseason games, and he was PFF's #1 rated running back on the preseason. Aaron Jones sits at number 14 for me. Really mysterious usage for him against the Jets. Only got 13 opportunities in that one. That's kind of why I have him this low. I still believe in the talent. I think that Washington is a team that they can run on. I also think it's a team that he has to be more involved in the passing game against. Basically 3.5 targets a game is all that they're throwing to Aaron Jones. And this passing attack has to do better. They have to get him up to like 6, 7, 8 targets a game. They're like 3, 4 targets. Those are rookie numbers. We got to pump those up. Come on, Green Bay, throw the ball a little bit more to Aaron Jones and feed us a little bit of that PPR goodness that we wanted when we drafted him. Because right now, this part-time duty, 13 carries and 3 targets, it just ain't cutting it. At 15, Jeff Wilson Jr. Matchup against Kansas City. We're going to have to see if San Francisco can keep pace. Last week, he got scripted out of the game. This is the danger when you play a running back on a team that you expect to win, but is not involved in the passing game at all. They can get scripted out. We talked about it with Nick Chubb. Same thing with Jeff Wilson Jr. His high on the year in terms of targets is 3. That's not great. They lost to Atlanta 14-28. He got 1 target in that game. This is not the usage that we want, but based on the fact that they are playing at home, they are such a good running game that is going to scheme the ball to whoever the #1 running back is, and right now that spot is vacated by Elijah Mitchell and occupied by Jeff Wilson Jr. He's the guy. Ideally, they want to get him 15 to 22 carries a game with 1 or 2 targets, and that should be enough for him to return value for you as an RB2 this week against Kansas City, albeit they are slight underdogs in that game. At 16, Raheem Mostert, another player that was being drafted super late in drafts, like the last round of drafts you could have picked up, brother Raheem. Not going to be that involved in the passing game, right? But he's not getting zeros, which is at least an encouraging thing. The prevailing thought was that Chase Edmonds was going to get all the usage. I never thought that was going to happen. You can't give Chase Edmonds more than 15 touches a week. You just can't. He'll break. So he's like a 10 to 12 touch a game guy, which leaves brother Raheem out there as somebody who can handle that sort of workload as long as he stays healthy. Now, granted, that's something he has not been able to do in his short career, but the mercurial running back has provided big playability with a 24 and a 25-yard run in weeks 5 and week 4, as well as a 16-yard run against Minnesota while playing from behind. He is going to have those ups and downs. This week is going to get a little bit hairy with your back-end RB, your QB1s, your back-end RB2s. It's scary in this spot, but Miami playing at home against Pittsburgh, this is the type of game where he's not going to get scripted out of, that they can run against Pittsburgh, that this offense, hopefully with Tua back, is way more diverse, and Mostert going to run against a lot of lighter boxes because of the presence of Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and the grandpa gritty Mike Gesicki at tight end. David Montgomery comes in as my running back 17 on the week, stepped back from his injury into a really high volume role and on a team that just refuses to throw the ball. When you don't spend on an offensive line and you don't spend on wide receivers, you end up with the offense that the Bears have right now. Now, thankfully, David Montgomery is actually a very, very good running back. He gets a lot of guff for I don't know why. He is one of the league leaders every single year in evaded tackles, one of the league leaders every single year in broken tackles and yards after first contact. He is an actually good running back. Unfortunately, he plays for the Chicago Bears, who just can't score enough points. So the big games are fluctuating. So 5 games he has played so far, 8 points in week 1, 18.6 in week 2, 1.1 in week 3 where he got hurt, 18.2 in week 5, week 6 against Washington, they scored 7 points. 7 points they scored. He had 9 fantasy points. I'm hoping for a bounce back here against New England, but we may not see it. The volume will be steady with at least 15 opportunities for David Montgomery. Somebody else who has stepped into a major volume role is Kenneth Walker III. The rookie out of Michigan State saw 21 carries and 3 targets against Arizona in week 6. Expect more of the same, although he's not going to get scripted out of this game, right? The script is going to go against Seattle if all things stay according to plan. They expect Vegas has the Chargers installed as 7-point favorites in this game, but the Seahawks still have a 23-point implied team total. That means it's not like they're going to get shut out in this one, and as much as they are going to work really hard to establish the run, Ken Walker is still going to see probably 15 carries, 12 as an absolute floor. But I'm hoping here, because I have to project a little bit, because we haven't seen enough games where Ken Walker has been the guy. He was the other guy. It's a totally different workload. They were playing from ahead the entire game against Arizona. What happens in games where they play behind? Are they going to bring in DJ Dallas, as many people thought in passing game situations? Or are they going to actually give Ken Walker the opportunity to have 5 or 6 targets? Now, historically, the Seahawks have not thrown the ball a lot to their running back, so 4 or 5 targets is an awful lot for any Seahawks running back, but he's going to get the opportunities inside the 5. He definitely has big playability, as we saw in both games post the injury of Penny, where he had a 69-yard touchdown run in week 5 and a 34-yard run from scrimmage, including a very nice and nifty 12-yard scamper for a touchdown last week as well. Ken Walker is my 18, and he comes in just ahead of Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Elliott clearly is splitting time, but he is getting the lion's share, about 65% of the running back snaps and touches for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm expecting this offense to be arrow up. They did very well in the absence of Dak Prescott with Cooper Rush under center, but they were not as diverse in offense, and they were not as efficient in offense, and they just couldn't do the same things that they could do with Dak Prescott. Kudos to them for winning games. They did very well in his absence, but now this Cowboys offense should return to the levels that we're used to from it, which means more red zone trips, more inside the 5 trips, which means Ezekiel Elliott has way more touchdown upside. Although neither running back is getting, whether it's Ezekiel Elliott or Tony Pollard, is getting a ton of usage in the passing game this year. It just seems that they've gone a different way with their offense. They play against the Detroit Lions, who've given up 27 or more points in every single game this year. So massive touchdown upside for Ezekiel Elliott. Not many running backs have stayed healthy the entire year and been more of a disappointment for their fantasy managers than Najee Harris. He is averaging 10.9 fantasy points per game. He was somebody that we did not advocate drafting because of the terrible quarterback situation that they have, the predictable low scoring offense that Pittsburgh was going to be thrust into with a low prospect rated Kenny Pickett or a Mitch Trubisky under center. They just have not been that viable in offense. And with the Steelers saying we cannot give Harris the amount of touches that we gave him last year, dialing back the volume, with volume being king, was always going to hurt his bottom line, and it really has. 12.9 fantasy points last week, but 6 of those came on a touchdown. He's had one game this year where he has gotten you double-digit points without scoring a touchdown. It's not great. If you drafted him in the first round where you had to draft him, you're still playing him, but I have him as the running back 20 on the week. At 21, somebody who you were drafting way later, 7th, 8th, 9th rounds, Edwards-Helaire does not have the volume of many of these other running backs, but he has the touchdown upside because of his job in this Kansas City Chiefs extremely creative inside the 10-yard line package. He has not gotten the volume at all. 9 carries against Buffalo, 9 carries against Las Vegas. Against Tampa Bay, he did get 19, but under 10 carries in every single game with solid enough usage in the pass game, except for last week against Buffalo where he got no targets. Every other game he has seen 2, 5, 4, 4, and 3 targets, but it's those touchdowns that are keeping him here. Much like Harris, very touchdown reliant, but based on the offense that he plays in, it's a very productive touchdown offense, and he has been their most played running back on red zone snaps. So the touchdown expectation remains high with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but he is very, very attached to the variance that's just inherent in his current usage. Somebody that's been an arrow up for me the last few weeks after being a player that I did not want to draft at his draft cost, but Travis Etienne Jr. is my running back 22 on the week. Congratulations, Travis. You have worked your way into a 50% timeshare with James Robinson. Ideally, I would like to see Etienne take over 65% of the work. I believe that they are going to keep James Robinson in as their short yardage back. He's been somewhat effective in those situations, and we're going to have to rely on volume for Etienne Jr. with a touchdown sprinkled in here or there on an offense that, other than week 5 against Houston, has scored 21 or more points in every game this year. So this is an offense that, it's led by a second-year quarterback who's going to have his ups and downs. They don't really have a super alpha on the outside. They paid Christian Kirk like one, but Etienne Jr. has looked extremely explosive in the last 2 games. A 48-yard run from scrimmage against Indy, as well as a 22-yard catch, a 30-yard run from scrimmage against Houston, as well as a 20-yard catch. I think he has earned more time in this system that they have in Jacksonville. Robinson is solid, but he's not as explosive as Travis Etienne Jr. is. So they have to manufacture more touches. They can't just give him the same type of touches. You're not going to run Travis Etienne into the line off guard 15 times a game. You just can't do that. You have to manufacture different types of touches for him. But every time the ball's been in his hand, he's clearly passed the eyeball test for us. Major explosivity with Travis Etienne Jr. and should be a guy that they have to make sure that they get 5+ targets a game to moving forward. If he moves into that 11, 12 carry, 4 to 8 target range, he is going to be an every week start and will climb up this board every single week. At 23 and 24, it starts to get a little bit ugly, and there are 2 injuries that we have to talk about. At 23, I have Dion Jackson, who performed very admirably in the stead of Jonathan Taylor. He ended this week with a good amount of snaps, right? He played 70% of the snaps for Indy and got 12 carries for 42 yards, but more impressively, 10 catches on 10 targets, coming off of 4 catches on 4 targets the week before against Denver. If Jonathan Taylor is still out this week, and we don't know if he is going to be out this week, we also don't know if Dion Jackson's going to be ready with his quad injury. This is a full-on monitor situation, but every other running back that I could have ranked at 23 or 24 is a time split. I would rather have the players, if healthy, be the main guy. And Dion Jackson right now, when healthy, and when Jonathan Taylor is not healthy, is the main guy who can definitely help you in terms of PPR. And James Conner behind him, who took last week off, but is practicing right now with that rib injury that he had sustained last season and then re-aggravated so far this season. If he plays, he will be the main guy for Arizona. If he does not play, we saw Eno Benjamin play like 100% of the snaps last week, like really a lot of snaps. So I'm assuming Connor is going to be back, which will make him the 70% guy. Eno Benjamin will return to a 30% role, which moves Keontae Ingram back down to a 0% role. Both 23 and 24 are if-then statements for me, so we have to stay nimble and have to stay kind of fluid in these spots, but I prefer either of those two to any of the other part-time backs like a Kareem Hunt or an A.J. Dillon behind them. So those guys are kind of sitting in a waiting, in the waiting room at like 25 and 26 in case Dion Jackson and James Conner can't go. Thank you guys for watching. Look out for another video right there.
He's a legend.